To talk to USA Today bestselling authors Cheryl, Bolen, and Emily E.K. Murdoch today. Ladies, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh,
Oh,
pleasure.
thanks for having us.
So we only had one release from Dragonblade this week, which is it's an anomaly because we've been piling on the releases. So Cheryl gets the whole entire stage to herself this week. Her book, the fourth book in the Beresford Adventure series, came out, Rescued by a Rake. Cheryl, can you tell us about this one? I love the taglines for this whole entire series. The stakes are so clear right up at the top. You know, that she's going to find her fiance, and the only one that can help her is the one who could steal her heart. And it's like, oh.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, as you said, it's the fourth book in the Beresford Adventures. And actually, the Beresford family was introduced in an earlier series of mine that was not a Dragonblade series, but it's still my best-selling series called Brazen Brides. And two of the Beresfords were introduced in that series. And then I just decided I wanted to do a whole series on them. And I've been kind of vacillating toward just going from straight romance, Regency romance, to ones that had an element of mystery in them. And because I love mysteries. And so each of the Beresford Adventures has a fresh romance, and each of them have a mystery to solve. And in this book the mystery is it's a missing person. And it happens to be her fiance, and she's been engaged for 6 years, which really wasn't done that much in the Regency. They had quick marriages, but she enlists the aid of his best friend to help her find him, and it's the whole thing is this quest to find him, and the national there's national stakes going and danger and stuff like that. So that's kind of, I have a different mystery in each of the books, but they're usually pretty high stakes, and there's always a damsel in distress. So I like those elements, but then I'm old fashioned. So but on the Beresford Adventures, the first 3 books came out in 2021. And they were really well received. I was really excited about them. 2 of them got perfect 5-star reviews from Indie magazine, so that was fun. I was up for a couple of different awards, and I even got Dragonblade bestseller 2 months. So it was really well received. But then the problem happened. I had this big, massive move. I had to move twice, and I was doing 2 remodels and all of this and packing, and my husband's handicapped, so I had to do all the physical stuff. So I didn't write for a year. So then Dragonblade wanted me to do 3 more books. And so I set my own deadlines, and I really gave myself some tight deadlines for me because I'm a slow writer. And so the first of the next 3 just came out this week. And that's the Rescued by a Rake. So these all have names like Rescued by a Rake. These next 3, Rescued by a Rake, Vindicated by a Viscount, and Defended by a Duke. And the next one will be out in early June, and then the third one will be out in September. And it's been just tons of fun writing, except I was under a lot of pressure. As a matter of fact, let me show y'all something. See all of this?
Oh my word.
I just finished the last book and turned it in, and that's my drafts from these 3 books that I just turned in, and I'm trying to clean up my office because I just this week finished the 3rd book.
So do you print after you do you print them as you go, or do you print them at the end? Do you edit on paper?
Both.
How do you?
Both. But see, I've been doing it for so long because I've been writing more than 30 years, and it took a while to sell that first book because I sold the first book 26 years ago. And of course, there was no internet even when, I wasn't on internet when I sold that first book. So things were different then. Everything was print, and there were no ebooks or anything in those days. So my method is to write a chapter, print it out, edit. And I don't go forward normally until I have completed and corrected that chapter, and then I go forward. Then when I finish a book, I print out the whole book and I read it in its entirety and find more editing mistakes and then reprint it again and again. So I tend to print a lot, but then I'm old school and I'm old. So, that's my method.
You're not old, you're seasoned. And I like,
Oh, yeah.
I do like the idea of, because I have been in the habit of printing. I don't do it as I go, but when I get stuck, maybe 2/3 of the way through the book, I'll print and go through and do paper edits. But I got myself a Remarkable last year because I was tired of having these big stacks of paper, and I love
amazing as the adverts say.
Oh, it is as amazing as yes, it is every bit, because it feels like writing on paper. It has exactly that same kind of feel. And it's skinny, and I can keep it in a folio, and I don't have to like do the lavender punch to get, to hold all the stacks of paper together and stuff. And I really do like that. But I think there's something different about the way your brain works when when you're sitting at a laptop versus when you have the paper in hand.
It definitely is. And, I came up through, I have a degree in journalism, and I worked in journalism for a long time. But my strength, I always thought, was editing. And I really, I took editing in college, and I always loved editing. And in those days, when we used to do our copy in journalism, it was all pen and paper editing.
Yeah.
And so it's just hard for me to break my old habits. So, but I mean, we're talking many decades here. So,
well, there's a lot to know. There's something to be said for knowing your process and sticking with your process, because I think it's like it gives your body the things it has to do so that your mind can do the things it has to. You give yourself structure, and then that gives you the space for the creativity to go the way it needs to go. So very cool. Very cool. Well, so what do you do with the stacks after you've got all the paper in your office? Do you have a filing system? Do you keep them? It seems like
no, I don't. I will keep these until I get paper copies of the books. And once I have paper copies of the books, I chuck them. I recycle. I'm big on recycling. I don't throw.
So if we went dumpster diving around Cheryl Bolen's house, there would be books.
Well, that's another reason.
Not an idea for anybody watching. Don't do it.
Once the book's copyrighted, I don't mind throwing them out.
Oh wow! Well, the Beresford Adventures, like I love that the series has the mystery component to it. I love Lady Mary's
Dangerous Encounter.
Dangerous Encounter, because I remember the cover, and I loved the tagline for that one too, because it was like her lady's maid's gone missing and nobody else knows, we'll believe her. And so like I love the idea of this mystery and then the romance alongside it. So I'm really looking forward to the next
I can't believe you remember that 2 years in.
Oh yeah, it's a good, like it's such a good tag when the stakes are that clear in the beginning. Then when I go to do the ad copy and stuff, it's so easy for me, because it's like I know exactly what the thing is. Like when I read this one, it's like, oh, this is this is one of those sketchy love triangle kind of things where she's promised to this man, and now she must find this man that she's promised to, with the only man that could actually win her heart. I mean, that's huge. The stakes there are just like they're right there, And
well,
it makes me think of things.
I guess it is bragging, but it was tickling because I have written 52 books, and it took me 3 decades, Emily, to do it. but I think I've gotten better feedback off the Beresford Adventures than any series I've ever done. And what really tickled me was Dragonblade allowed me to keep my foreign rights, and I have a really good translation team that I work with. And when my translators started translating some of the Beresford Adventures, they usually just say, "Oh, I love your books, blah blah blah." But it was like when they translated these Beresford Adventures, it was like, "Oh, I love that book!"
Yay.
I think
That's the best.
a couple of them, number 2 and number 3, there's a from the minute the book starts, somebody's in danger. And my translators loved it. So that made me feel so good, because out of 52 books, these are the ones that are really, really resonating. So that made me, I was so excited about it.
And I think readers love to come back to series and to have a continuation, because as you say, you had that first 3 that did so well and people loved and people clearly remember years later. And now there's this to that world and to back into your writing style and to meet characters again. And that's, as a reader, I love that. And I think that as writers, it's I get a lot of feedback. Certainly if I go back to a series and start to extend it, people say, oh yes, I really love this, I want to see more.
You are so right. You've nailed it. And when I started in the industry, they didn't. And I started with Regency Historicals. In 97, I sold my first book. And in those days, they only wanted one and one at a time. And I think it was like 2002, I was writing for Kensington and they asked for a series. And then, I have to tell you this bad mistake I did. So I had a series with 3 siblings and it was the first 3 Brides of Bath. And then about a year later, my editor came back to me and says, can you write some more in that series? Well, there was nobody else to do. I had already done the 3 siblings. I had no other character. And I had to kill off a character, this guy's wife, so he could remarry. And my readers, they'll never forgive me for killing them. So, try to keep your, I learned. Because in those days, this was 2002, and they were just starting to get popular. Series were. I learned now to try to keep your avenues open for expansion.
Yeah, every single one of my books features at least 2 friends of the family who are the same generation, and a mention of cousins who you never meet.
That's right.
So if that particular book or that particular part of the series gets popular, I can be like, and here are the cousins, there's 7 of them, off we go. Yeah. Otherwise, you write yourself into a pigeonhole, and all of a sudden you've got nowhere to go.
And you can't kill people because it's bad.
No, don't do that.
I know.
We watch them get their happily ever after. We want them in our heads to always be happy because
I will say it was a secondary, romance that I killed off. But still, you're right. You read don't want. But you learn that the industry changes, and it's gone now. You can't. And now that I do have, I started indie publishing 12 years ago with books that I had gotten my rights back on. And so after I started, I put out 6 or 8 books that I had gotten my rights back on, and then I realized, this is better than going to a publisher to do your own indie books, and you get a much higher royalty and all. So then I started doing originals. And then once I was wearing a publisher's hat was when it really came home to me how popular series were. Yeah. My standalones don't sell at all, so people want series. So now that's what you deliver.
Yeah. Well, we like to get attached to families, whether they're biological or found. We like that idea of characters that continue to come up. And I think that's because of the way we consume our media now. We binge watch things, we watch series in a stream. So I think we put some of that same thing in.
And again, I think this is age related because I have a son who's married, and he and his wife, they don't watch anything that's not something that's extended episodes. They like to carry one story all the way through. My husband and I still like to look for standalone movies because I'm still in that standalone mentality. But then, I'm considerably older than both of you ladies. But the young people, they really do want, episodic things with, continuing characters.
Yeah. Oh, well, wonderful. Well, we have 3 more books or after this one launches, we have 2 more books to look for in this series afterwards, and that makes a 6-book series. So very, very, very cool. So Emily, we're going to talk in just a couple of weeks, but you've got a new series coming out. It's the Dukes in Danger. So we're going to continue the historical mystery.
And it's funny, if someone said to me, are you a mystery writer? I would say, absolutely not. I can't be dealing with all the red herrings. I'm not, my brain doesn't work that way. But I think with romance, it pairs really nicely. I'm sure, Cheryl, that you found this, is that there's already an area, an aura of will they, won't they? So there's already a question mark. So there's already an element of mystery, even though in most cases, who's going to, how are they going to do it is the mystery. And so I think by adding a secondary, and by the way, his twin brother is missing, or, but actually her father, had a huge outstanding debt, which has now suddenly been called in, and we're not sure how we're going to pay it. That kind of bigger, broader, looking at the world question mark actually makes the romance more interesting as a reader, I'm starting to find, but also as a writer. Actually it's even more challenging for my hero and heroine to get together, and I find that the more things I shove in their path to prevent them from getting together, the more fun it is when they actually do find their happily ever after. So this is
they
a
have
series,
to work for it.
They got to work for it. It can't just be handed to them, And so the Dukes in Danger series is, we've got one book out and we've got 2 books on pre-order. They have a bunch of fun titles, which I had a huge amount of fun working on. And in each one, there is a Duke who is bored of being a Duke. There's not a huge amount to do. It's very staid and restrained. And so sometimes they go looking for danger and sometimes danger happens upon them. But in each case, there's usually something to solve or something to overcome. And the heroine is sometimes a help in that, and sometimes a complete hindrance, depending on the book.
Well, I kind of like the idea of getting a chance to be a Duke with not enough to do.
I mean, who wouldn't want that? Seriously. Like, oh no,
I'm trying it for a short period of time.
My landed estate is so dull, But I think, it's something that I was talking about this with an author friend who shall remain nameless because I don't know if she's happy for me I was talking about this when I was first thinking about my series proposal for Dragonblade. I knew I wanted to do this series, and she was saying very like, Dukes, how can that be boring? That sounds wonderful. I'd love unlimited money and social stature and dancing and hunts and ball. Like, that's what I want. And I said, well, if you think about it and turn it a little bit on its head, Dukes are just as restricted as women in Regency England. Dukes have to marry a certain person. They can't marry for love. They can't go everywhere and anywhere. They can't just wander off and leave their responsibilities behind. They have a duty to their family and their name. They have a duty to bear heirs. And actually, it's quite restrictive. And I was trying to think about it, and I was like, actually, I think money, would get boring very quickly, especially if you were born in it. And I do have a few Dukes who don't really value what they have and don't really understand how privileged they are, and actually meet people who go, if you ever worked a day in your life, you've got no idea how nice this silver spoon is in your mouth. But I've also got characters who pretend to be Dukes because they crave that life, and they try to, cheat people into thinking that they're Dukes and being treated well because they think, well, actually, that is a wonderful life that I would like. That does provide its own set of problems when you are discovered, and people shoot at you. Very inconvenient. But I think it's a really interesting way of looking at Dukes, of like, yeah, you have all this power, but if you're never allowed to use it, is it really power?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what's your purpose beyond to be a figurehead? So it's like the thing that gives life meaning is your purpose in life, and if you don't have the agency to be able to do that, that's
Yeah.
I remember when I don't remember what number, but when the Duke of Devonshire died about more than 10 years ago, the one who was married to Deborah Mitford, and in his obituary I was reading, and he said, well, because they're head of the Cavendish family, he says, well, we Cavendishes are an indolent lot. Your
words, not mine, mate.
Well, without opening a can of worms, because I'm not sure how everybody feels about the crown or Prince Charles, well, King Charles now.
I know. It's even as a Brit, and I'm sure all our lovely readers can hear my delightful English accent, there's a lot of feelings about King Charles, and I'm still getting accustomed to saying King Charles rather than Prince Charles, bless him.
Well, we've been saying Prince Charles for almost 70 years.
It's really bizarre to think that, I was born under a female monarch, and I don't think the next 2 or 3 generations will ever know a female monarch in this country, assuming we have a monarch, because all the rest, the next 3 heirs are all male. So it's kind of weird to think that I'm a second Elizabethan. And people born today they're not Elizabethans. I'm an Elizabethan. Me and Shakespeare, best friends. But people growing up now, they're not Elizabethans. That's quite a bizarre change for us.
Yeah, I know. I didn't consider it that way. But there's one section in The Crown where he's talking about being at the height of your power and being cut off. You know, like being a man at the height of your your skills and not having anywhere to go with that. You know, when you're 50 or 60 and should be in your full power, and then
prime of life sort of thing.
Prime of life,
yeah.
and prime of competence, one would hope. You know, and not being able to do that, but. I hadn't considered that. You're an Elizabethan.
I'm an Elizabethan, you know, and my mother was before me, and her mother for a time was, but she was born a Georgian, technically, George VI, which is a weird thing to say. Again, people have this kind of dissonance because we think of the Georgians as being so far away.
Yeah,
but
like history's back there.
Yeah, but we had two George kings the last century. You know, I know quite a few people of the older generations who were born during that time.
Well, neither of you are part of an indolent lot. That
no.
much I am very sure of. And I was hoping because Cheryl, the Rescued by Rick is the 50th book that you've published. And because you've been writing so long, and Emily, because you're more recent, I know you have more than 50 books out.
They're not all novels. They're not all novels. A lot of them are novellas.
Well, and like that, and that's one of the things that's changed is the length between is what is traditional trad length and what is length. What are word counts now? But I was hoping we could talk a little bit about career longevity and just a little bit about what it's like. To be in an industry and grow with the industry. I know, Cheryl, you talked about going indie when you got your rights back, but you've had to pivot in your career quite a bit, I would imagine, to stay relevant and as on top of your game as you are now.
Well, I don't know how on top of it I am, but it is.
Well, we're going to declare you on top of it. So,
but it is funny to look back over because I joined Romance Writers of America 30 years ago. And I am not a member anymore since their big implosion, but which is it's almost like losing a member of the family because I was so in love with RWA and it helped so many. I mean, that's how I sold my first book was through an RWA contest, and an editor asked to see the rest of my book. Just things like that. I mean, in learning the industry, it was a wonderful, wonderful thing. But 30 years I've been involved with romance writing, and it really has changed. But the sad thing, and I was just talking about this to my husband the other day, a lot of the people that were the authors that I just sat there and just gushed over when they would like speak in an RWA meeting.
Susan Elizabeth Phillips and Jane Ann Krantz and Nora Roberts.
But no, I'm talking about on the local level. A lot of the gals that were multi-published when I started are no longer writing. And even people that started with me, a lot of them are no longer writing.
Yeah.
And so, I do have longevity. I'm not saying how, it's been a hugely successful career, but I do have a longevity. And I think part of that is because I believe in treating it as a business. And I do have friends that I think treat it more as a hobby. And author friends that like, well, I think I'll write this week, but maybe not, I've always treated it as a business. And there has been times like last year, I took off a year because of all the moving and all the stress and all that. But when I'm working, I'm very serious. I keep logs every day of how much I do per day and how much I've got to go. And that kind of, when I started in this industry, my first contracts used to specify book length. And when I first started, they were doing like 100,000 word books. And then it went down to 88,000 in my contracts. And then when I started doing originals that I self-published under our imprint, I went down on the length. So I could write them faster if they're shorter. And you don't have to write to spine anymore. We used to have to write to the spine because all the books in that line had to have the same size on the, on the shelf and all that. So that was a big difference for me, was that I could start writing shorter. And that helped a lot too. But, there have been so many changes. Like I already mentioned, when I started, they were all standalones. And now you've got to have series. And people like, Emily comes up with great ideas and great titles for her series. That she's just really savvy about the industry.
Well, I think you're right though. It's the business side. And when I left my full-time job to become a full-time writer, I had a working day. I still have a working day. I have office hours, and I'll share this. I'll be totally honest. I have 3 different work emails. One is my PA email that I kind of overlooked for a little while as I was training them. One is my main author email. One is the one that I use predominantly for Dragonblade, keep that separate. And yesterday was the day that I finally took the last one off my phone, because it's really important to me that I have time that I'm me and time that I'm the author. And time that I'm the author is in this room, at this desk, writing, working, marketing, promoting, talking to Dragonblade, working on this, working on that. And then when I'm outside this room, I'm Emily. And I'm not working, because it's a job. It's a job I love. It's a job that I never, ever want to give up. It's a job I adore. And I worked really hard to get to the point where I could make it my job. But I have to treat it like a business if I want to be doing it in another 10 years' time.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and the separation is huge.
Do you think you spend a comparable amount of hours as you spent when you did work outside the home?
Because I was in a very intense job, I was a chief brand officer for a health tech company during a pandemic. I don't recommend it. And I was writing about 20 hours a week to try and build up to being full-time. So I was working about a 90 to 100-hour week. So I'm massively down on that now. Mm-hmm. But I work 6 till 3 every day. It's a 9. I take about half an hour for lunch, but I'm working a full day. The plan eventually would be to lower that down and to put more on the PA in terms of the admin side, and then have more creative stuff that's just me. But yeah, it's a full-time job essentially. But I do have a high output. If I had a lower output, I could reduce those hours down. But I like the high output right now. That's working for me right now. I don't have any children. I don't have any caring responsibilities. If that changes in the future, having a backlog would be really useful. So and it is fascinating. I've been writing 10 years, and when I was first published was after Kindle had been launched, and everyone said, well, audio will never take off. And of course, audio has massively taken off. And everyone said, well, we'll always have audio narrators. We'll never have AI. Computers and AI won't be able to do that. And now they're doing that. And I think one of the things that I find challenging in terms of longevity is that I am not very future focused in terms of the industry. I'm very future focused in terms of my career and the books I want to write and working with Dragonblade to talk about series ideas. But I'm not very good at predicting what's coming next. I'm the one saying audio is not going to be big, and then audio is big, and then I know, well, AI will never do it, and now AI is. And now that I'm full-time and this is my job, this is how I live and how I pay the mortgage, I'm starting, when I think about longevity, to be like, so what's publishing in 5 years going to look like? How can I guess what trends am I seeing? Is it to go longer? Is it to go shorter? Is it translations? What is it? And I don't know the answer to that. If anyone has the answer, put it on a postcard, post it to Bath, England. I'll find it somehow. But I think a lot of authors are like me. We're happy to pivot when things change, but we're not good at predicting what is going to change. I think if you're one or the other, that's fine. I think I'd like to be both. I'd like to be better at predicting what's going to happen, but I just don't have the knack for it.
Right.
So, Cheryl, have you been able to see things ahead of time moving through the industry, or have you felt like you?
No, not me personally. It's funny because I have seen a lot of changes that have come over the industry in these 30 years that I've been involved with romance writers. And the year that I joined RWA, the very first year, I saw Diana Gabaldon at a conference. Mm-hmm. And she was as big as they get, because Outlander had come out and it was humongous. Can you believe Outlander's been out more than 30 years now?
Yeah, that is hard to believe.
Every publisher, because I used to go to all those conferences, and they'd always have, their editors from each house there telling you what they were looking for. And all the publishers after Outlander all wanted time travel. Mm-hmm. And then, 5 years later, you couldn't sell a time travel.
Yeah.
Then the next thing that came up was, Bridget Jones' Diary. So then after the success of Bridget Jones' Diary, everybody wanted chick lit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, I know people that jumped on that bandwagon to be told, oh, well, we can't sell chick lit anymore. So they had written whole books that never got picked up. And then came Harry Potter.
And vampires were in there too.
Twilight.
Everybody was doing IA with paranormal elements, and that was huge. Well, I have a friend that was very, very successful in paranormal after all of this. And then with a big publisher, and after 10 books, they cut her off. Mm-hmm. Paranormal's soft now. You can't sell it, unless, a couple of huge people like Cheryl and Kennan or something like that. Mm-hmm. But, that's how publishing is cyclical. Well, I've never been a cyclical person, I formed my opinions on fashion in the 1960s when Jacqueline Kennedy was the first lady. And I still like to dress the same way Jacqueline Kennedy.
You picked a good role model.
I was going to say, of all people to pick,
like that's a pretty good icon.
I think you nailed it.
But she always wore solid colors, straight lines, and that's what I've done ever since. So it's like, I never jump on the bandwagon. Right now, the hottest thing in publishing is Colleen Hoover. And she writes a really dark book. Now, I don't read dark because I like light.
Very dark.
But everybody wants Colleen Hoover style books now. And somebody that I know now want to start writing dark because they want to be the next Colleen Hoover. But that's going to change. I can tell you. That's all I can tell you. That's one thing I can predict, and that will change.
The one thing you can predict is unpredictability.
Yeah. And by the time you recognize that it's probably moved on, by the time we as a collective consciousness see the trend, the trend is already trending over there, and the next big thing is down here somewhere. I think there's a lot to be said for finding the lane that is your lane, and then trying to own your section of that lane.
I do worry about Regency because I can remember. Do you all remember Jo Beverly?
Oh yeah.
I loved her books. I met her a few times when the old Beaumont, and I remember her exact words one time, and this was in the 90s, late 90s, and she said, "I don't want to be crushed under the popularity of my genre," and that's what we're doing now. Regency is so popular, and everybody is writing Regency. When I used to. I've been in Beaumont for 25 years, and it's now called Regency Fiction Writers, and you ladies know that. But we used to have about 300 members, and about 30 of us were published. Well, now the Beaumont has about 400, Regency Fiction Writers has close to 400 members, and close to 400 are published, because everybody, can self-publish now. And that's just Regency Fiction Writers. But I figured out, I was doing a talk a couple of years ago at one of the RWA things. And at that time, and it's more now, especially since Bridgerton, but at that time I figured out, I think it was something like 10,000 Regencies a month were coming out.
Wow.
Just a phenomenal number, phenomenal. So we may get crushed under the weight of the popularity of our genre,
Well, and I think that circles us back around nicely to what we were talking about with just touching on AI, and that is a can of worms I am not going to open. I already did King Charles. I'm not doing AI today. But that idea of the promise that you make to the reader and the reader's experience and the commitment that you give to the reader, and so there may be 10,000 Regencies a month. But if you come for a Dragonblade book, you're going to get a certain level of storytelling, a certain level of quality. The same way it used to be back in the early days of publishing with imprints. If I give you my time, you're going to give me this level of story back. Yeah. And I think that that's part of what will make the difference with AI and career longevity is there are some authors that I buy, like I just buy, I buy them right away because I love that author, and I think that part of the care and feeding of readers is probably what will make a difference. We could do this all day. We've been
I know
like way over time. I'd be content to keep going. If you want to do it next week, we can do it next week. We can take a day off and come back anytime you want to talk, ladies. I would be happy to talk.
Well, I was scared, but it's been fun.
It's always fun.
Everybody's always worried about the technology, and I got to tell you, if I can't click it and make it work, then that's probably out of my scope. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I'm going to make sure that Cheryl's book goes in the comments. So if you haven't gotten it already, you can grab it. The whole series, there are 3 books preceding this. So if you haven't had a chance to read those, you should definitely do that. That can be your whole week's worth of reading this week. And we will be back next week, same time, and we'll talk to Emily about her next Dukes and Danger book in a couple of weeks. So, ladies, thanks so much for taking time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Evelyn. Wonderful to meet you, Emily.
After so many books we've read.